All right. Well, welcome everyone to our first live broadcast. So if we have any issues, I will, please give us some grace there, with our first live one. I already had my first mishap here, listening to it on my other screen and yelling at myself here in my own ears. So, welcome to our live broadcast. I've got Matt Lanza with Space City Weather. Very excited to have you on. So, thanks for joining us today, Matt.
Yeah, Tim, great to be here.
So, the last couple of years we've done this over my podcast, and we've been talking about the upcoming hurricane season, what to expect, how to prepare. This year we changed up the podcast a little bit, so we're testing out this live stream format. So, if you can, please give us, maybe a little background on Space City Weather and what happened last year compared to your predictions.
Yeah, so just a little bit about Space City Weather. We are kind of an informal weather resource for the Houston area. We started, myself and Eric Berger, back in 2015. And then during Hurricane Harvey, there were a whole bunch of people that were just sharing our stuff with different people in the area. And we kind of blew up from there. And now a lot of people use us to get daily weather updates. We send out a post every day, and more when the weather's bad. And basically our mantra is to be no hype and only really be in your ear when you need us to be in your ear. And that's kind of how we roll. And it seems to work pretty well. Yeah, there you go. You got the mug. Usually we sell a little bit of swag in November as well to help fundraise for the site some. But we've got an app, we've got, a website, all kinds of ways you can reach us and check us out, spacecityweather.com. And yeah, one of the things that's kind of our bread and butter is obviously hurricanes. We tend to do our best traffic during some of those bigger storms, Harvey and Hurricane Laura being another example of that back in 2020. Coming into last year, it sort of looked like we were in for another real busy season. And then, in the middle of July, it just shut down. And there was a lot of talk among meteorologists of what was going on here. Why all of a sudden were we expecting this, and everything seems like it's primed to be active, and it's just not happening. And there was some suspicion that maybe wind shear had something to do with it. And, wind shears, again, when you have these strong winds that go across the Atlantic Ocean, tropical storms and hurricanes need calm environments. They don't just need warm water, but they need the atmosphere around them to be calm. And if you have a lot of wind shear, you don't have a calm atmosphere. They're just not going to develop, at least to the extent that you would expect. But even last year with a quiet season, relatively, we still had Hurricane Ian, which devastated Southwest Florida. So, another one of those big Gulf storms that just kind of remind us that, hey, we live on the Gulf Coast.
Yep.
And things can be kind of crazy. So, last year was very interesting, and it was a ride.
Yeah, and for us in the Houston area specifically, I feel like we've kind of gotten a pass the last few years. Louisiana maybe hasn't been as lucky, unfortunately, for some of our friends over there. They've gotten pummeled a few times. So, I kind of get this sense that we're due a little bit. I'm hoping that's not the case, but kind of if we're looking ahead to 2023, what does this look like?
Yeah, it's a good point because, it's sort of as a meteorologist, but also the person that has to worry about everything. I have the same thing in my head. All right, we've been too lucky in the last few years. But the reality is Houston doesn't get hit that often by big storms. So this is not that uncommon. Our last storm was big storm really was Hurricane Ike, from a hurricane perspective that hit Houston. That was back in 2008. So it's been, a good 15 years since we've had one. So maybe we're getting up to the point where we're due for something, a little bit more significant. This year will be a very interesting hurricane season. We have extremely warm water across almost the entire Atlantic basin. But especially as you go to the north, which is actually kind of good news for us, because that's more of the Atlantic side, what we call almost the subtropics. So, getting north of Florida and off the Atlantic coast, that area tends to be pretty warm right now. The Gulf is also very warm, but it's come off a little bit from where it was a few weeks ago, even a couple of months ago, where it was running really, really above normal. That has kind of come down a little bit as we've had some snow melt run off the Mississippi River. We've had some more clouds and some more rain. That's helped a little bit. And so you've got an environment that's set up kind of, a little bit of a battle in terms of water temperatures. But then the big wrinkle this year is going to be El Nino. And we have not had that in a few years. And what that is the tropical Pacific starts to warm up, gets warmer across the equator from South America back toward Indonesia. And as those water temperatures warm, they tend to enhance wind shear. There it is again in the Atlantic basin. And what that does is tend to put the kibosh a little bit on storms. It doesn't guarantee that we're going to have a quiet hurricane season, but it's definitely something that we are encouraged to see developing right now. So kind of putting all that together, I think sort of our baseline expectation is an average season, which would be about 14 or 15 named storms and 7 or 8 hurricanes, and a couple of them could be big. Exactly how that shakes out, obviously TBD, but at this point, we don't expect the season to be too insane, but we also don't expect it to be completely silent either.
Well, it's definitely good news to hear that it, is again not expecting a really active season. And I have to say, you explain El Nino a lot better than Chris Farley did
Well,
back in his day. But it is so. You talk about the wind shear and El Nino kind of causing those storms to stall out. When you think about Hurricane Harvey, that was kind of the same thing that happened, the storm stalling out and having just rain dump and dump it up, and kind of going all the way back to like Allison, where the same thing kind of happened. Is that more of a possibility now for those storms to kind of stall and just rain and not necessarily have the wind?
Thankfully,
The
not.
massive wind. Okay.
Yeah, thankfully not really, but I would caution that this is probably a year where, and I feel like we say this every year, but it really feels that way this year, where because that wind shear situation is going to be so strong outside and across the basin, that you're going to have to watch closer to home. You're going to have to watch these storms that just kind of form in the middle of the Gulf, not the stuff necessarily that's coming all the way, across the ocean, but the stuff that kind of just forms from, rogue thunderstorms that move offshore, or cold front that makes its way offshore. I think that's going to be kind of what we want to watch a little bit closer. And, that's certainly not diminishing anything, because again, some of our bigger storms can sometimes come from that. Hurricane Alicia in 1983 is a good example of that, where a front moved offshore, some thunderstorms that blew up into, a big hurricane that caused a lot of damage in Houston. And honestly, 1983 is a great example, because that was an extremely quiet hurricane season, one of the 5 quietest on record. But it still produced Alicia. So, I mean, that just kind of goes to show you that even in years where we do expect things to be kind of, a little bit calmer than maybe they've been compared to the last few years, you still got to pay attention.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's an interesting point. And I remember my parents talking about Hurricane Alicia. I wasn't quite old enough to remember that one yet, but definitely a big storm here in the Houston area. So, and I know something y'all talk about on the website as well, but what are some things that people could do to prepare either their house or maybe their business for this upcoming season?
Yeah, so one of the first things you want to do is have kind of a plan. You need to have a plan in place. So understand what your hazards are. We talk about hurricanes and tropical storms being multifaceted. You've got storm surge, you've got wind, you've got rainfall flooding like a Harvey situation. Not every property in the Houston area is vulnerable to all those things, but there may be some that are more vulnerable to storm surge and some that are more vulnerable to wind damage and things like that. So kind of understand where you're located, how close you are to an evacuation zone and things like that, to understand what that risk is. And then just follow things throughout the season, pay attention, use local media, whatever you prefer, to get your weather information. And, just keep tabs on things every couple of days. It's important to just kind of understand, what's going on, because a lot of times I think one of the things that people don't always appreciate is that we don't have necessarily as much lead time as we think we have to get people evacuated and get things prepared. So you may have to act a little bit quicker than you want to in certain situations. So just, paying attention to that and having that knowledge base certainly helps a bit. And again, like I said, know your evacuation zone if you are in one or if you're not in one. Like if you live, you don't need to. There's people that always have the evacuate. No, you don't need to evacuate, Katie. We always say, hide from the water, hide from the wind, run from the water, right? And the water that we're talking about is a storm surge. You have to evacuate that. So people in Galveston County, coastal portions of Harris County, know what evacuation zone you're in. So you know that if the time comes, it's time to go. And just, have your kit ready, all your supplies, not so much that you're going to be stranded at home, but if you have to evacuate, you have those with you. You can just take them and go, have copies of important documents available as well, digitally or otherwise. And just do as much as you can now to reduce the hassle then. And that's really what we tell people.
Yeah, I think it was it Ike that had such a mess everyone trying to evacuate and basically getting stuck on the freeway. I mean,
Rita in 2005.
That was Rita.
Yes.
That's right. Rita 2005.
Horrible.
Yeah, I think after that, after that one, I don't know that anyone wants to evacuate from Houston anymore after that. Like, you're actually having to force people at this point, like you said, go ahead and get out. But yeah, that, getting that early preparation done is huge. And especially when we're talking commercial buildings, definitely this is the time to go through, make sure that all of your, flood mitigation systems are in place, any floodgates, sump pumps, emergency power, making sure all of those systems are working, so that if you do get surprised by that storm, you're ready to go, like you said. So great advice. And if there's anything else you'd like to share with anybody, this would be the time to do it. I have links to a lot of the websites that we've talked about in the past, the Harris Flood Warning System, obviously Space City Weather, and some other good resources that I'll put in the comments. But if there's anything else that you feel like is good for people to know for this season, please share.
I think a lot of the links you're going to share are going to be extremely helpful. We have a lot of information out there on local government websites, local agency websites, and organizations. Everybody has just got a ton of stuff out there for you to use, and use it. Make sure you check it out, and don't take hurricane preparation lightly. I think it's one of those things. Even I kind of fall into the trap sometimes, where it's like June 15th, and here I am, and I haven't really done anything to kind of prepare, and it's like, yeah, I should probably do that. Practice what I preach. And it's easy to kind of get into a situation where we just don't have that storm that year, and you're like, well, maybe I'll let it go this year. Well, that's the year that it's probably going to happen, right? So prepare every year like it's going to be the year. And hopefully whatever you can do early on in the season really helps to lower the stress level a little bit when the time comes, because when that time does come, it's going to be stressful. And
Yep.
just try to reduce that as much as you can.
Absolutely. Well, Matt, I appreciate you coming on and sharing everything with us today, and definitely appreciate what y'all do at Space City Weather, keeping us all informed without the hype, and giving us that reliable source of information to make decisions on. It's definitely helpful, and I know a lot of Houstonians appreciate it. So thank you very
Well,
much, sir.
thank you, Tim. Thanks as always for having me, and it's good to chat with you again.
Awesome. All right. Well, everyone, hope you enjoyed our live stream today. And if there's anything else we can do to help, feel free to check out Space City Weather or holler at Cougar if you need any help in your commercial buildings. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.